Hello, writers, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's live stream episode, Writing My Novel Progress Report number 24, Wake Up, Dead Man. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, channel that I have created in order to try and share the creative process that I have been figuring out for the past 30 years, 25 years working as a professional writer in TV and movies, now retired from that and starting to work on a novel for the first time in decades, sharing that process. I've also spent some of the past 5 years trying to take the lessons, the skills, the tools, the insights that I had to figure out for myself in my career, trying to break in, trying to work, trying to put those all into some lessons, which are here on the site. You can look at this as a screen grab of the current front page, and if you look down, you'll see there's a bunch of playlists at the bottom. Here's a close-up on some of those. Screenwriting essentials, screenwriting tools, skills, and craft, and the process being a writer. Those three playlists are there for you. Each one there's about 50 short videos, each about 10 minutes long, each on a topic. The topic is the title. It's also the thumbnail, so you can just scroll through, look, bright colors, flashbacks, dialogue, character, genre, all those things. I tried to put whatever I could down for you, and that is there. I beg you to look at that, because that is really what it's all about. That's where all of my wisdom is presented. Having finished doing that, I then started doing live streams, which I currently do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. And each of these live streams is on a different topic. Today, I am giving a progress report on writing a novel, because that is what I'm going to be focusing on for the next, could be forever. And I had taken about 6 months off. I'm going to talk about that. First, I'm going to say some quick hellos. Hello, Feng. Just came back from the cinema watching Frozen reissue. How did I completely forget the plot? I watched it when it was first released. Cool. I've never seen that. I am glad that you are watching movies. That is a good thing to do. Hey, Nishaj. Hey, Thomas Lewis. Good to see all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're getting back into the novel. Here we go. Yeah, that's it. And I'm calling it Wake Up Dead Man because the last time I did one of these novel, where am I, what's going on, sharing my process, it was February. It was 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago. And what I decided then was I started this thing in 1996. That's where I got the idea. I was reading a biography of Jackson Pollock. An idea came to me, and so over many years, I would try and figure out this story. Couldn't quite get it, didn't quite know what I wanted to do with it. Over the decades, I compiled many, many, many pages working on it, and I came up with a basic story. The past few years, I have been really trying to outline it, to write the first draft, all of which I have done. I spent maybe a full year figuring out scene by scene what is happening in this story, because there are a bunch of layers to it. There's the story, what the people are doing, but there's also a set of ideas that I was trying to convey. A bunch of things about art, and being an artist, about painting in particular, and it took me a long time to figure out what those ideas were and what I wanted to say about them and how that would fit into the story. I finally figured that out. It took forever. Please look back at the past 23 of these live streams on this topic to see a little more about that. But then I spent a long time following the process, which I tell you, the one thing I'm doing here is trying to walk the talk, to do as I teach, to show you by doing it myself. And one of the things I had to do then was to say, okay, I personally like to outline. Doesn't have to be the way you do it. Every artist has to figure out their own path. But what I did was I outlined it, because to me, there's so many things I could say that if I don't have a reason, a purpose in the story for each scene, I just get lost. So I figured out the every single scene, and then I wrote a rough draft of that. And then I rewrote that, filling it in, trying to make it more readable, trying to figure out the style, the way that it was written. I got all that done last February. I had a full draft. Every single scene in the outline, there was a chapter of text, often very rough. At that point, I said, I'm going to put this aside because I really want to steer this channel and my life towards writing this novel and working in this new art form. So in order to do that, I wanted to sort of finish up the screenwriting lessons that I had put into those videos, and I thought I should write a book version of those lessons. So I spent the past 6 months compiling the scripts of those videos into a book. The reason that I did this was severalfold. The first thing was I wanted to sort of, like I said, close off a certain type of what I'm doing here. The screenwriting teaching. I really feel like I've said everything I have to say about screenwriting. Happy to answer questions, but truthfully, please do look at the channel. These 50 videos in those first 3 playlists, the short videos, that's where you're going to find almost everything I've ever thought in my life about writing. But then, if that's not working for you, get the book. I got a book here. Here's a quick glimpse of the cover. It's just working on the back cover today. I'm very excited about this. This is going to be great. Book should come out in the next couple of weeks. But I also wanted to learn self-publishing because the thing is, realistically, a novelist in his late 60s is going to have a hard time, even finding an agent. I'm not even sure I should find an agent or want an agent, but if I did, that's the only way really to get taken seriously by publishers. And while I don't think that any of the major, the big 5 publishers, there's only 5 big ones left, they've conglomerated, the odds of them taking it on are pretty slim. But there are an awful lot of small presses, and they quite likely, I think, might want it. The question is, do I want to do that? There's pros and cons. I'm going to talk about that in detail. But just in case I don't want to do it, that would mean self-publishing. And so I decided self-publish the screenwriting book. I have a built-in audience. Hello, thank you. So glad you exist. And I can, and honestly, in many ways, it is easier to sell a nonfiction, a how-to book, than a novel. So I thought, let's explore self-publishing by doing the screenwriting book. Then I'll know what I'm getting into if I decide to self-publish the novel, which I'm kind of excited about doing. So that's what I did. The screenwriting book is now almost done. It will be out in the next 4 weeks, I expect, which means it is time to get back to the novel. And that is what I did, what I have done. I'm going to answer some quick questions here before I get on to it. Okay, first of all, Arrow Flight. Hi. Very, very nice. Thank you so much for the videos. Help me get through my art block. That is so cool. That is great. That is absolutely fabulous. I am so that you have no idea how much that means to me. Thank you, Arrow Flight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. Feel free to ask questions. Huge week for Germany Football Rocks as a Paul Thomas Anderson fan speaking. Me too. I have my tickets for Friday. I'm going opening day to one battle after another. Looking forward to that. And yes, I thought we were talking about Daniel Craig's new Knife Out meeting. I think of it as Rian Johnson's Knives Out movie. And the title of that movie, just like the last one, Glass Onion, Rian Johnson, the writer-director of that trilogy, took it from a song. The song is by U2. I think it's from the Pop album, might be. I think it is. Anyway, it's actually a really good song, Wake Up Dead Man. They're discussing Jesus and perhaps he should come back and get on the case here of our messed up world. Anyway, so but Wake Up Dead Man, it was on my mind because I am much looking forward to, I was delighted by Knives Out, even more delighted by Glass Onion, cannot wait for Wake Up Dead Man. But the reference for me is I have been sleeping on my novel. I have been dead to the novel for 6 months, and now I'm coming back. Hi, Scipular. How much research did you do? I will answer that in a moment. I'm going to just quickly catch up on where I am with the novel. So here's what happened. This Sunday, I opened my novel file for the first time in 6 months. I had the manuscript. It was in Scrivener. That's what I work in. And what I discovered about self-publishing is you can self-publish from Scrivener. You can do it from many different applications. It happens that I'm already working in Scrivener and like it. So it's like, hey, cool. So I learned a little bit about compiling, which is how Scrivener takes its many, many documents and puts them into a single manuscript. So the first thing I did was format the novel manuscript, which had been like a novel manuscript. It had been set in courier type. It looked like a manuscript. But when I did the screenwriting book, I realized it makes a huge difference to the way I read it, to read it formatted as a book with a readable typeface. So what I did was I reformatted it, I compiled it, and I printed it. Yes, 300 pages, about 100,000 words. And I wanted it to look like a book because it changes. I've talked about this in my rewrite video. It changes your perception of the work when you reformat it. There actually might be times when I change the format entirely just to see it with new eyes. In this case, 6 months was part of the reason. The idea was to get away from it, to forget it, to lose my familiarity, so that when I went back to it, I could read it as a reader, as a person who didn't necessarily know every word of it. And that has where I'm halfway through. As you can see, what I did was I've got a big red piece of cardstock here. As I read the pages, I put them behind the cardstock so I know where I am. What I actually do is I take a bunch of pages and I put them on this little clipboard here, and I have a red gel pen. And although I'm trying not to use it, I'm trying to just read the first time through. I'm trying to just read through it as a reader. But truthfully, it's very rough. And there's a lot of spots where I'm like, I just have to make a note. So I'm jotting that down. When I get through the pages on the clipboard, I take them, put them in the back of the folder, take another hunk of pages and put them on the clipboard because I like to actually get away from my desk. All of these things are ways to get out of the familiarity, the mechanical familiarity, which makes it hard to see your own work. So I printed it, which I won't always do. It's a lot of pages, but for this read through, I wanted to print it. And then I take my clipboard and I move somewhere else in the house and I sit and I read there. And then so that's what I've been doing. I can say that the important thing was I started to see it as a book, and I did see it's going to be there. It's not there yet. It is not a readable manuscript yet. It's not a readable book. But the story is right. All that work I did outlining and figuring out the emotional and practical events and the way that the ideas and the feelings unfold, they're there. They're not well said. They're messy, but they are there. I can now say I am okay with the story I am telling. So let's talk about how I am telling it, and that is my next layer. because now I am determined to get it. Now that I know that I can self-publish things, now that I know that I'll have to decide, and we'll discuss that. We will discuss that later in months when I have the manuscript good. But I am now on. That is my main project. For the past 5 years, my main project has been screenwriting teaching, and now I am moving to a new project. And we'll talk about that, because that's one of the things that you need to learn if you're going to be a writer, professional or not. The thing about writing is that it's project-based. You are continually starting something, working it through, and finishing it, and then moving on to another thing. That's very different from a lot of other kinds of work. If you have a store, I mean, sure, you might go through phases, but when you have a store, you're basically there like, hey, who's going to buy my stuff? And you're trying to things, but you still have the same store. It's not a new store every time. When you are an artist, it's a new store every time. It's a new project. And even though you may have decided on a genre, you may have decided on a style, but it's still a new piece every time. And you need to go through this process of beginning, middle, and end. And it's hard to get used to that because you think, well, is this the right one? Am I doing it right? Is this as good as the others? As good as the next one's going to be? So the screenwriting project, I am winding down. I'll stay on, the Q&A stuff, but I'm really focusing now on becoming a novelist and sharing that process. That's what I'm going to be mainly doing here. The first thing was I'm always afraid to reread my work too much because I'm afraid of losing the ability to enjoy it. I'm afraid I'll get bored of it. And so I try to just work piece by piece and not look at the whole thing. But there are times when you need to look at the whole, you need to experience it as a flow. When somebody is reading your book, they're not like, okay, I'm just going to read this chapter and then put it on. They want the story. They want the flow. They want to get into it and get out of it whenever they want, but they want it to be there. So the main problem I have right now as I'm reading through is it's sprawling. And I don't mean the story is sprawling. The story it goes many places, but I mean the writing itself is sprawling. It is not sticking with the narrative. It goes, it's messy. And one of the reasons is that I would, if I had something I wanted to say, like I knew in the outline, this scene is going to be about this guy learning that he likes his romantic rival. Well, I tried saying that maybe 5 different ways, like sort of getting into it, describing it in detail, restating it different ways. So this 100,000 words I have, that's way too many. I want to cut it way down. And I'm going to be able to, because like I said most of the things in it 3 or 4 times. Like most of the things I'll describe, I began to like this guy. And I'll say that so many different ways. I have to choose now the ones that feel right and edit and delete and revise until I'm only saying it once and I'm saying it the way that the story needs it to be said, the voice that I want to have in it. That's the task. The main job now is to take the sprawling 300 pages and hopefully get it down to about 220. I don't know if I will. I think I might actually. 220, 250. That's where we're headed. Maybe even just 200. My goal is to have this be a quick read, something you get absorbed in, you get involved in it, and you get out of it. The Great Gatsby is in many ways the way I want it to read. And that's short. That's a short novel. So I did find the point of each thing, of each scene, and I did say it, but I said it often way too elaborately or without a dramatic drive to it, just sort of like discursive and descriptive and just sprawling. Sprawling is the word. So now I need to take that sprawl and say, within this cluttered pile of possibilities, what's the one way this story needs it to be said? The one way I want to say it in this story. I'm gonna stop here for a minute and answer some more questions. How come Charlie Kaufman so easily found a publisher to publish his novel? Because he was famous. Because Charlie Kaufman was a celebrity name. He was one of there are very few screenwriters in the world who would whose name you would know. Aaron Sorkin, maybe. There's just not many screenwriters that people know their name. Charlie Kaufman, partly because being John Malkovich was so weird that it made him a name, but adaptation, because it's about Charlie Kaufman trying to write a script, that made Charlie Kaufman literally a brand. So he could easily find a publisher because people would be like, hey, there's a Charlie Kaufman movie audience. They would probably want to read his book. That makes it interesting, just like having a large social media following or being a famous football player. All of those things. If you decided to be write detective novels and you used to be a pro football player who's famous, it's going to be much easier for you to find a publisher. So that's how. Okay, Adam Lum, kind of want to get it done in a month. Like when I do screenplays, but 3,000 words a day is a bit. Adam, I don't know where you started. Okay. Fabulous. We're talking novels. I've brought Scrivener as some very flexible tools for me. Yes. I do have to say, I am getting more and more to where I want to actually recommend Scrivener. It's a really good writing program. It takes a while to understand how it works, but they have these tutorial videos, and I do think it's worth it. It's not that expensive. You don't need it, but I like it. Okay. Tough time to release a screenwriting book, with Craig Mazin releasing his screenwriting book in the period as well. Yeah, I'm not really worried about that. I thank you for mentioning that, bringing it up, because, yeah, first of all, it's not like we have an opening weekend. It's a book. It's supposed to be out there for years. So I'm not really concerned about. And also, I'm not doing the thing where you like try to publish something and you want to make a stir with this screenwriting book by targeting and getting all your publicity in the same week so that people hear about it. I'm not worrying about that. It's too much work. It's not the point of what I was doing. I will be trying to do publicity and stuff, but I'll sort of roll it out as I go along. So Craig Mazin has every right to write his book and every right to publish it. I don't feel like I'm in competition with anyone. I feel like my book is unique. It's different enough that people will discover it, hopefully. We'll see. Hi, Pennywise. How do you spell that website you are talking about? Scrivener. No, it is Scrivener. Let me see. I think I have... Yeah, here it is. Boom. Scrivener. And if you look that up on the internet webs, you will find Scrivener. Their website, I think, is actually called Literature and Latte. But that's it. Roberta says, I am considering starting a TikTok movie review channel. I would say, do it if you want. Do it. Be creative. Whatever. This is my vibe. What the heck? What do you got to lose? Suppose you don't get a lot of responses. Suppose people don't like your stuff. Oh, well, you're having fun doing it. Do it. That is my thing. Hello, Caplander. Caplander loves my videos. I'm spending so much time to shape my story and characters, but I want to start my screenplay. Should I start writing my script and shaping the story around it, or something else? Cool glasses, by the way. Thank you. Here's my take on that. And I've talked about this a couple times before, so do try and look through some of my old live streams, my Ask Me Anythings. The answer I would give is, I personally like to outline. And I've got a video called How to Outline, which I suggest you look at, and why outline, even more important for you. There's a video that I did called Why Outline. And I'm going to there. Boom. There's what it looks like. Boom. And then how to outline, in case you like the ideas. My take on that is, for me, it is I get stuck when I don't outline. It's just that simple. If I don't have a plan where I can say, today I just have to get this scene done, I can't write. I get paralyzed. I get confused. So for me, outlining is really important. And even with this novel, especially with this novel, honestly. So I would suggest that that you should outline. If you don't want to, that is cool. But then recognize that, first of all, you might get stuck. And if you do, just pause, don't panic, step out and maybe sketch out a plan. But the other thing about not outlining is that means you're probably going to have to go back and rethink some things, because you're going to discover stuff along the way which needs to be planted or set up or built. Like you may actually decide a character, it's like, oh, you know what? This guy's a jerk. I thought he was a nice guy, but in fact, he's a bad person. You might later want to, like, there's things that you're going to discover along the way that's going to require you to go through drafts. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely fine. Just know that that's what you're going to do. In other words, you will very likely rethink things as you go along. That is cool. For me, it's better to do that in the outline, where I can sort of step back and say, oh, well, if I do this, and to make those choices so that I can then make the other choices about how you say it. First, what you want to say, then how you say it. For me. Other people, they like to do it as they go along. So Kaplander, I would say, try it the way you feel like trying it, but just recognize the pros and cons of both. And I would suggest watching the Y outline. I would just say in general, my channel is going to steer you towards outlining only because it's what I know and what I can trust. But if you're feeling like, also sometimes what I've done, sometimes I write until I crash, until I run into a wall, and then I stop and outline then. So, do whatever you want. There is not a right or wrong. There is the should in your question is, should you? Do you want to? Is it feeling right to you? Do you mind getting stuck? If you don't mind, great. And also, you never know what you'll discover. So I would say do whatever keeps you writing. But if you find yourself lost or stuck, try outlining. That's my suggestion. Stay Foolish watched Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master after I recommended. Maybe I'm too stupid. I completely failed to understand what was happening on the screen. You are not stupid. It is a difficult movie. And yes, and you are not stupid. That movie, honestly, it requires to a certain extent a second thinking. But I mean, basically what's happening, as I understand it, is that there is a very damaged man, Joaquin Phoenix, the main character. And he's been damaged by his whole life, even before the military, but then he was in the war. Comes back from the war, as many people did, damaged. And so therefore, he's looking for something to help him not fall into a pit of self-destruction. And he finds this cult with this cult leader, and he gives himself over to it. Even though it is flawed, it does help him. So I think there's a lot to discuss about it. It doesn't have it's like, this is what it's about. But much of what's happening on the screen is you need to interpret it. You need to say, why is he like that? What's happening what is he trying to do? What is he feeling? Why are they, those are things for you to ask. It's not going to tell you. So that's my take on it. Michael Tanaka says, I heard the singer Toni Tennille took her demo tape to radio stations and asked them to play it. Within a few months, Love Will Keep Us Together became a big hit. So I assume that's about self-publishing. And the answer is, yeah, cool. That's great. It was a different time, but it is possible. It is possible to grassroots an audience, I'm hoping. Okay. Sanchez Pablo says, curious what you think about Eddington. My screenwriter teacher in uni hated it and thinks it glorified far-right politicians. I disagree with your screenwriting teacher. Here's the thing. I want to be careful about spoilers. So what I will say is, I think Eddington is brilliant. It's messy. It's difficult. I tend to like things that are a little difficult sometimes. And so therefore, not always, honestly, but Eddington, the thing about Eddington is that in this story, everyone is wrong. The point is not these people are right and these people are wrong. The point is every single person in the movie has something that they believe in, but they are not recognizing the other realities around them. And honestly, as the filmmaker Ari Aster has said, the real story, the real villain of Eddington is the story of the data center. What's really, to me, cool about this movie is that, like our present reality, I believe, it is trying to portray how people get, because of our technology and our methods of communication and social organization, people are being manipulated by the side they're on. They're being manipulated and they are being kept from understanding a wider picture. And he is suggesting that, in fact, that is partly fed by those who want to do their own evil projects, like building data centers. And so they like it that we are all fighting over the wrong things and missing what they are doing. That is what I think it's about. I certainly don't think it glorifies far-right politicians. In fact, far-right politicians are not the problem in the story. Frankly, corporate business interests are the problem in Eddington. Some people didn't get that. I think that's too bad, but I loved it. Thought it was great. Okay, let's get back to writing. Why were you afraid you would get bored? That's a great question. Let me talk about that because it's one of here. The skimming problem was in my notes on what to talk about the novel. The problem is when you have worked on something a whole lot, you start to not see it. You see what you think it is, what you plan for it to be, what you intend for it to be. And so you don't see it. Just like when you come home to your house or apartment or whatever you live in, you see it and you kind of don't see it because you have expectations. And so you might not, when you lose something in your home, assuming you don't have a monstrously large home, it's got to be there somewhere, but you don't see it because you think, oh, well, I know what's on the counter. I know what's in the closet. So therefore, I don't have to actually look. That happens when you are creating something. I begin to say, I know what this character is like. So therefore, the question of, is this scene actually making them like that? I don't really see it. You need to actually step out and say, it's like changing the light. It's like changing, you need to change something in your perception in order to see clearly the way that a stranger would see it. So I was a little afraid that I would simply, because I've gone over it and over it and over it, I wouldn't see it. And I tend sometimes when I'm rereading my own work to skim, to say, oh, I know what this is, and to not actually read it. Now, I'm going to mention something that the movie director, Sidney Lumet, talked about. He was talking about, I was just checking the time, and we're good. Sidney Lumet said that when he's directing, and I don't personally think this is a great idea, but he didn't look at the monitors. He got close to the actors and he watched the actors. And he said the way he decides if a take is working is whether or not he gets bored, distracted. If he's losing focus, that means something's wrong. I think that can be a problem when you're working all by yourself in your life because the actors aren't there for you. When you're looking at your own script, what I've discovered is like I'll just sort of zone out when I'm reading my manuscript. I will find myself having gone a page or two and thought, I wasn't really paying attention to the words here. I knew what it was going to say. I knew what it was about, so I didn't pay attention to the words. But when you're reading it for the first time, you're paying attention to every word. You are hopefully engaged. So I was afraid that I would skim. I've discovered, first of all, skimming is my problem. It's not the book's problem. It is that, but I'm now trying to pay attention. When I skim, the answer is stop reading for a minute. Go stretch, take a walk, drink some water, maybe do a separate session later. But what I've discovered is I don't actually get bored if I am engaged in the moment. That really at this stage of the writing, the danger is that I will not say, how does this scene, this one scene work? How does this sentence work in this scene? How does this paragraph? And for me, my scenes are short. They're, like a couple pages tops. So in that, 500 words of a scene, to say, just be in that moment, focus on it, find the words to get the voice, to get the rhythm, and then I'm not bored. And so what I learned was I was afraid of being bored because I was not engaging scene to scene. And what I've discovered is if you really, really engage and get the scenes right, and then you put them together, at a certain point you can read it and be engaged in the story all the way through. That's what I'm trying to get to. Right now, as I said, my text is often sprawling. Often it will say the same thing 4 different ways. I'll have like 4 paragraphs describing a feeling, and I really only need 1. And those 4 paragraphs kind of repeat things. And so that gets boring. As a reader, it's boring. But my task is to say, how can I make this one scene work? And then it's not boring for me. I hope that's explaining it. It's hard to say. Hello, Junior Henry Kane. 250 pages is acceptable for a quick read. At least it's not 800 pages. Absolutely. Okay. TV show, early edition. Main character gets tomorrow's paper today. He's messed up by losing the love of his life. There's a lovely scene where he commiserates with the man who lost her in turn. Cool. I'm sorry that you wrote that a while ago in reference to something that I was saying, and I'm not sure, because you wrote that about 15 minutes ago, and I apologize for not seeing it then. Let me know, Pennywise, what that was in reference to, but it's cool. Hi, Anne. Nice to meet you. Miller Turner says, with the same logic, maybe establishing ourselves as an influencer in TikTok will help sell our screenplays as well. Yes, although less screenplays. Screenplays are tricky because screenwriters don't matter. Your screenwriting name is not going to sell a movie. Have you ever heard of anyone who's like, oh, I'm going to go to this movie because so-and-so wrote it, unless they're a filmmaker themselves. The regular audience, they know directors, they know actors. That's it. So therefore, if you were selling a book, yes, an influencer in TikTok probably would, the name would matter. But the name of a screenwriter probably doesn't. If you were going to make your own films, you're going to make an indie film and direct it yourself, yes, then the TikTok influence would help. Anne is glad to hear about the novel again. Yeah, me too. Thank you for being here about it. Thomas Lewis, who works on Scrivener, I compile from Scrivener at least daily into EPUB. It takes 1 click. Then I read it in Apple Books or Kindle, and this is my version of reading it like a reader. That is cool. I have not tried that, and I will. That is interesting because, yes, printing it is one thing. I do that rarely, but it does help shake me loose. I have not yet tried reading it on a reader, and that would be really cool. Okay. Thomas Lewis says, I draft first, then do everything a plotter does later. So this is about should you outline. This has the advantages of both and the disadvantages of neither. For you, it has the advantages of both. For me, it would have the disadvantages of both because I would not be able, I would be unable to actually write. Arrow of Light, will your soon-to-be-released book be available only in printed version or as an ebook too? Will you announce its release on your channel, like a post or? Yes, absolutely. The answer is yes. It absolutely will be an ebook. And it will be, I will announce it as soon as, what I don't want to do is, you know how people do teaser announcements and prep announcements and it's coming soon. I hate that. Honestly, I wish that when they put out a trailer, you could go to the movie that day. When they put out an announcement, I want it to be like, when you hear that I've announced the book, it's because you can click on it and read it today. So that is it. I will be doing that within the next month, I hope. So thank you for asking. Burgundy. You talked about drafting process and how it helps you find the ideal way to express your novel's style. How do you do it? Do you compare drafts together or to the story? That's a good question. The answer is I do it within the chapter. In other words, if I've decided that a chapter is going to be about Tom, the narrator, realizing that he actually has come to like Charlie, his romantic rival, what I'll do is I'll simply write that. But I'll write it a couple different ways. I'll say, I began to see what she sees in him. And then I realized I had begun to like him. And then I'll sometimes write sort of 4 versions of the same thought in very different paragraphs and sort of get them all down there. And then later I have to read it and say, okay, this one's better than that one. And I sort of make combined pieces of them. But what I want is to have all the materials in the text. The first rough draft is simply getting as much as I can out of my head into words on the page. When I have done that, I then start to say, well, which words work better for this story, for this chapter, for this moment? Because I'll just, when I step away, I'll like some more than others. So for me, I like to have it all in one place, like put it on the table, and then I play with it and collage it and revise it to get it to work as a single unit when it starts out as a table full of scraps, if that makes sense. That is how I have been working. Bruno says, what should I do? I am writing without an outline, and now I am in page 80, and it seems to be still in Act 1. That's possible. It is what can happen. What I would say is, are you having fun? If you are enjoying it and you know what's going to happen in Act 2, I would say, first of all, try and get to Act 2. But it may be that you are going to write a 300-page draft. That could happen. That's what happens when you don't have an outline. It could easily happen. That's okay, because it's just your draft. And then later you'll go back through it and you'll say, do I need all of this? Basically, you will be sort of outlined thinking after you have all the material, which is not unlike what I've said I do scene to scene. So the answer is, what should you do? If you've gotten 80 pages written, great. If you can keep going through the entire story, keep going. Get it down. Then you can read it and you will begin to say, how can this 80 pages become 20 pages? Because if you're a screenplay, your first act should be about 20 pages, 30 pages tops. Probably. Not always, but mostly. So what you're going to have to do is say, what in this can I condense? What in this can I move till later? What in this can I cut? Because if you've got 80 pages for a 20-page area, you're going to need to cut. That's why I outline, because it kills me to cut stuff. Sometimes I'm like, oh God, that could be cut. But overall, I would say either, if possible, I would just keep writing. Just keep writing, get to the end, and then think about it. If you are finding yourself stuck or spinning your wheels, you might try outlining from there on. Like try making an outline is just a list of scenes. So all you need to do is say, okay, what are the scenes that are going to come after my 80-page first act? And make a list of those scenes and think about, is it too long? Is it telling the story? Whatever you're going to do with your outline, try that. That would be my second choice. The one thing I would not say to do is go back and start again and outline from the beginning. And you've got 80 pages. In those 80 pages, there's got to be 20 pages of really good stuff. Good enough. So therefore, whatever you're going to do, Bruno, do from here on. Either continue writing as you are and then know you're just going to have to do a lot of work later of cutting, or start outlining from where you are. And then you can write to fill in the outline. See how you feel. Arkmish. To what detail do we need to outline to have a sufficient sense of the complete story? Like, do we need to reach till writing about each scene what happens and why it happens? Everyone is different. I personally do need a great deal of detail. However, there are some people who just do like a sentence, just like, basically, this is where the guy confronts it. This is where the guy finds the tablecloth. This is where the guy, gets yelled at by his boss. And you just write a list of scenes. Maybe that's your outline. That's okay if it makes you feel like you know what you're doing. For me, there's always questions. Why is he doing this? Is this where he should do it? So I tend to really get granular on exactly what's happening in every scene. That's me. That does not mean you should do that. The answer is you do as much as you need to feel confident and enjoy writing a bad draft, because the first draft's always pretty bad with some good stuff in it. So that is my thoughts. Michael, reading your material countless times is like watching a movie several times. Time makes you a different person and you make discoveries. Yes, reread. This is absolutely true, and I advise doing that, by the way. But what I would say is the problem is time does make you a different person. If you're trying to get the book done, you probably are going to be rereading it every week, and then it's like watching the same movie 5 days in a row. At a certain point, you're not discovering new things because there hasn't been time. So that's the tricky part of this. And that's why I actually put it away in order to give myself time. But now, from now on, what I'm going to have to do is stick in the moment, in the chapter, in the scene, until I feel like I've gotten everything as fixed as I can, everything as good as I can, then stop and reread the whole thing. And that's when I might put it on an ebook or do something to see it differently. Roberta says, about politics. I just attended a David Zucker screenwriting class, and he says writing politics in the screenplay is stupid because half of the audience will be pissed before the movie's even started. Okay, David Zucker is old. And he has his opinions, and that's great. But he is a product of Hollywood. And therefore, he is thinking he needs to make a movie that is going to appeal to a big audience. But what if you want to write a political story and it's going to piss off half the audience? And so therefore, you're going to do a small movie. Then his advice would be bad. His advice is right if you are writing, trying to write big studio comedies, which is what he does. So the answer is, in my opinion, it is true that if you are trying to be pleasing to a large corporation which is in the entertainment business, they are going to want you to steer clear of anything controversial. The problem is very often that means that things are bland. That's it. I feel exactly the same way. I'm afraid to get bored with what I'm writing. Just like you, I see everything that I want my movie to be about, and then I start writing and I don't give it all of what I imagine. Yes. Okay, Nishash, that is exactly, but the problem is we have to overcome that. Like we have to know that about ourselves and say, how can I not do that? I feel there's two ways to avoid boredom with a project. The first one is when you step back. Like if you're going to read it, like I said, print it out, put it on an ebook, change the font, and give it time. The big read needs to be somewhat fresh in your mind. But the way that I get rid of boredom other than that is to be micro, to just do one scene at a time, to do one moment at a time, to just say, how can I make this moment not boring? Because that you can usually do. That you can usually say, this scene is about this guy kissing his best friend's girlfriend. And then you think about like, what's the feeling about that? What are the, why particularly do I think this particular person in this particular moment did it. Was it a plan? Was it an impulse? It's two different stories. So you choose one, and then you say, well, how does the impulse get provoked, or how does the plan build? And then you try and, like, I don't find myself bored or lost if I am just doing one moment at a time, one scene at a time. That's, for me, the answer. Where can we find the things Sidney Lumet said? You can find that in his book, Making Movies. Do I have a thing about that? No, I don't. Sidney Lumet, Lumet. Here, let me see. I haven't done this since I got my new thing, but... Let's see what happens if I try adding this. Boom. Okay. So yeah, there is a book, called Making Movies, written by Sidney Lumet, who is a great film director of the 1970s through 80s, into the 90s, I guess. Anyway, he tells a lot of interesting, and he gives good advice, while also it's a terrific movie-making memoir. And you should watch his movies. Okay. Yes, stay in the moment. That is my solution to boredom. Okay. Adam says, what I love about Glenn's approach is its non-prescriptive approach. I always thought I'd be a planner as a writer, but I ended up being a pantser. And I always use Glenn's 6 questions, and I can then convert the draft into outline points as I go, and then see the whole thing. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Adam. First of all, thank you for the compliment. Second of all, yes, as far as I can tell, my experience and opinion is that it doesn't matter when you do the steps, you're going to do them all. Sooner or later, you're going to have to ask questions about the character. Sooner or later, you're going to have to think in an outline sense. That could be after you've written the draft. It could be, as Adam says, that you pants your way through a draft going just by feelings, and then you step back and you look at it, and either on paper or on a page, or just in your mind, you say, now I can think in outline terms, which is about the shape of the story and the pace of the story and the mechanics of the story. That's what the outline is about. And so for me, that's helpful in order to figure out what to put in my pantsing. But if you end up doing that after your draft, that's not a problem. That's fine. Everyone has to figure out their own thing. I was reminded by your description of your character realizing that he likes his rival. The bitter rival things is pretty tired. Yeah, I agree. Well, honestly, I wasn't even thinking that. I was simply thinking, I came up with this story about this love triangle. I didn't really know what it was. Like, when I first thought of it, I didn't really know, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought about, this is a story that takes place literally over decades. So therefore, things change, relationships change. And what I wanted to talk about is how these 3 people who have very, very different philosophies, very different personalities, and they all they like something, they love something about each other, but each one is on their own journey, and the main character is the narrator, who I originally thought was kind of like Nick in Great Gatsby, in that he was really telling a powerful story about another person. However, as I've gone on, I've changed my mind about that. It's really Tom's story. It's the narrator's story. We don't know that going in. Spoiler alert. The story is about how these relationships make Tom who he is by the end. I'm trying to keep my spoilers minor. So what I discovered was, one of the things is that happens is that Tom initially does not regard Charlie very highly. He thinks he's crazy. He thinks he's an idiot. Partly because he's neglecting his girlfriend, who Tom is in love with. But Charlie is neglecting her because he is so consumed with his art. And as the story goes on, Tom begins to understand what it's like to be an artist. And he begins to actually have those feelings himself. and that complicates his contempt for Charlie, because he actually kind of admires that about Charlie. So that's, I figured it out as I went along, but I did it in the outline. All right. Okay. So Adam says he outlines before and after, but very loosely. And thank you. He's congratulating me on getting back to the novel. Yes. Yeah, that's it. Like Stephen King famously does not know everything about the story, but he has said he has a loose shape of the story, a loose idea of where the story is going when he starts. I think very often, some people at least, you naturally think of the story. You just think, what's going to happen in your mind? You want to think, oh, this is a story about that. Even if you start with no idea where you're going, your brain runs ahead. Some people may not do that, but I think most people, you do. It's a natural question. Sealy Jack says, I am writing, a prince has a curse that he spit out fire when he is mad. He retreats to the North Pole to protect others, but now his country is in trouble. He must return. How can I build the world? Sealy Jack, because I want the world to be almost the same as our world, but he has this unexplainable special power. Great, you know what the world is. Luckily, I happen to have done a whole video on world building. So there you go. Please watch that. I will put a link to it in the description when this is done. Please, no more questions, by the way. It is lovely to see you all, but I do have other things I'm going to have to do soon. I will put world building and why outline in the description of this video after about 10-15 minutes after we are done here. Look in the description below and you will find a link. So Sealy Jack, I'd say the first thing to do is watch the world building video. The second thing would be, if you still have specific questions, put them in the comments to the world building video. I will see them instantly. Or send me a message through my website, which is here. Click on contact me at this website, which is under construction, but should still have contact me going. And ask me the question and I'll try and answer it. Hello, Gary. How are you? Burgundy. How would this power change this world? Don't mind how it exists as much as why it exists. If you included it, must be for a reason. Maybe not. Maybe he just had a feeling. But the answer is do exactly what Burgundy was saying, which is, okay, think, what would this power, if this world is like ours, how is it like ours? And what would, really think out, what would it do to the politics? What would it do to how people regard the prince? What would it do to the prince's desire to change things? What would it, think it out on paper, on the page, write down notes, make a plan, think. Because the main thing is, whatever you want to say, you have to figure out, where in the story does it happen? You can philosophically say, oh, he's going to use he's going to become a benevolent tyrant or something. Whatever that is, you need to think, what are the actual moments of that thought? Henry Kane says, I have a completely different problem with not writing an outline. I was thinking of a teenage pop star coming-of-age story, but it ends up being a music company succession power struggle. Awful. And Burgundy says a legitimate question. Why is that awful? Can't it be both? A coming-of-age story of an artist and a company, or how does a company change with the times? Yeah, I got to say, Henry, I don't see... the only thing awful would be if you are devoted to the coming of age story, you may have to make the company succession story less important. But the main thing is, what's awful is only that it wasn't what you thought. And that's what happens when you write. It happens when you outline or when you don't outline. It just happens in the outline instead of in the text. Still happens. Everything that anyone writes, it changes as you work on it. And what you want to do is create a process that allows that. Then you have to make decisions. Do I want to minimize the company's succession story to emphasize the coming of age? Or, as Burgundy said, well, I want to do them both and put them both in there and figure out how. Either one is fine. You just have to let this be the process. You're learning. At very least, you world builded your coming of age story. You found about the company. But it sounds like you've got many interests. Think about how you can tell that story of both. How do they affect each other? Oops. That was a mistake. Okay. I'm glad I have helped Nishaj. My favorite character is Tom. I'm beginning to admire him and want to read his book. Thank you, Michael. Michael is remembering what I talked about 6 months ago about the main character, the narrator, Tom, and the fact that the book is written as his memoir. So thank you. That's what I was trying to describe earlier. Reverse plotting. Draft, then fix what the draft has not accomplished after it. Yes, exactly. There is no right or wrong way to write things as long as you are feeling productive and like you're learning and figuring it out and you're having fun. If you're liking it, it doesn't matter how you got there. Maybe you inch by inch every sentence and get it perfect and don't move until then. Or maybe you just blurt it all out and then go, oh, that's what I had to say. Either one is fine. Just keep working it. And whatever you didn't do, you're going to need to do that at a later stage. If you didn't think about the story, you may have to stop. If you didn't work out exactly what details are going to happen in the words, you're going to have to do that after you finish the outline. Either way, you're going to have to do it, which is fine. That's the job. That's the fun. Gary says, do you find writing a book allows you to remove self-imposed or industry rules when plotting it out? Yes. Or do you inform your book writing process with your screenwriting experience? Also, yes. It has actually been something of a struggle to let go of screenwriting rules. For instance, this novel is not in a 3-act structure. It's actually in a 5-act structure, or it's really in a 4-act structure with 5 little intersperses between, little commercials in between. So it's a 4-act structure, and the story, each act has its own sort of theme or movement. And then the story together, the 4 movements together, that felt like the right story to me. So it took me a while to let go of the 3-act structure. So the answer is, I am learning to be free of the industry standards of screenwriting because they don't matter in a novel. What matters is making the novel work as a book. So that, yes, the answer is, but my screenwriting experience does help because I do feel, and actually the teaching experience here has helped too. I do feel like my process of writing scripts helps me with the process of writing novels because even though it's bigger and more complicated, I'm following the same routine, making the outline, writing the very rough draft, etc. Oh, way earlier, Jackie, I Hate Jackie Chan asked me a question. How much research did you do? The answer is too much. I did way too much research and I am still doing it. But what I've gotten to now, and this is actually the important thing I want to talk about here in my notes, I want to talk about this reading has told me that it is time to forget about the outline. For the first time in years, I am not working in the outline from now on. I'm going to only work in the text. I'm going to only work in the words. It took years to get there, but I'm finally at the point where I don't want to look at the research. I don't want to look at the outline. Later, when I have the manuscript as good as it can be, I will go back and add research. For instance, when I have a scene down, like I've got a scene where Tom is describing the artists that he is hanging around with in New York City in the 1930s. And he's talking about how there were different cliques of artists. The surrealists, the social realists, the American scene. There were these different gangs of artists. And I am trying to describe them. Later on, I'm going to go back when I have those paragraphs roughed out pretty well. I'm going to go back and look at the work. I'm going to look at the paintings. I'm going to read about it a little more so that I can get texture, details, names, descriptions, all that stuff. And I'm going to thread them into that text. But until then, I have actually hit a point when research, which I have thousands of pages of research that I typed out of books, and the outline, I'm not looking at them anymore. I'm going to not look at them for a long time while I focus on what matters, which is the text. That's a new phase of this book. Okay, I gotta go soon, so let's see. Where am I? Okay. I like it when Stephen King shares the stories he couldn't finish because he couldn't figure out the ending. Yeah, that is one thing. I didn't know he did that, but that's so cool. I'm actually going to be doing something kind of like that down the line if I have time. Yeah, the problem with not knowing the ending when you start is you may never know the ending. That's the price you pay. If you're someone like Stephen King, who churns out book after book after book because he's a natural gifted person, who just writes like mad, then you can afford to lose some. I've read about Michael Chabon on his Substack is talking a lot about his writing process, and he talks about the books that he got into and then stopped because he didn't know where they were going. It makes me sad. I wouldn't be able to do that. It would frustrate me no end. But if you write a lot, or if you're comfortable with saying, I'm going to start something and I may not finish it, then that's okay. I need to know that I can finish it. Hi, Ming. Hello. Good to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Somehow the son of the CEO in Henry Cain's novel, he's working on a coming-of-age story, became the protagonist, and the pop star didn't get involved in the main story. Okay, well, here's the question, Henry. How do you feel about that? Do you kind of like your new story? If it turns out that you like your Succession company story more than your coming-of-age story, maybe your coming-of-age story will become the sequel or a side venture. If you don't like that, then push that aside and focus on your coming-of-age story. There isn't a right answer. The answer is, what do you feel is worth your committing to? Making a choice. Making art is making choices. This is one of the main things. Do I have this? Yes. I don't know. I thought I have it. Making art is making choices. Oh, well, I had a graphic of that. Making art is making choices. That's the point. So Henry Cain or Jr., the answer is there isn't a right or wrong. Maybe you want to then go back and sort of weave the coming of age story into it more, give it a little more room, have it affect the main story. You'll decide, but you're not wrong either way. Do the one that... Here's the way I look at it. If you write something, what you want to do is make the choices that even if someone else doesn't like it, you feel like, I'm okay that I did it that way, even though I may not have pleased that person, even though I may not have pleased publishers. If you feel good about it, that's the main operating principle that you want to follow. Roberta says, I am shocked that Christopher Nolan said the Dark Knight screenplay information is from Dr. Mabuse the Gambler, a German film 100 years old. That's so cool. And why not? Why not? You never know what feeds an artistic idea. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. When your whole career requires outlining, it's not easy to shift gears. I'm happy to see that you have. No, I still outlined. My career, my novel requires outlining. What I've shifted gears on is what the outlining is like, what the outline structure is like. You are welcome, D-G. Hello, Lake Filter. Glad that you are here. Good to see you. Okay, everybody, I gotta go. It is marvelous to have seen you here. You are welcome, Pennywise. So glad that you guys have all been here. This is delightful. I will see you all next week. Probably going to be talking about either an old script or maybe Substack. Haven't decided yet, but next week will be something interesting. I hope that you go write something.